Audio Jungle.
Challenge 3, the Sandman is the fastest time to complete 20 repetitions each for the Advanced Division and 10 repetitions each for the Novice Division of front squats, shoulder to shoulder, box step-ups, deadlifts, power cleans, and a 50-meter overhead sandbag walk in 25-meter intervals. For the men's advanced and novice division, the weight of the sandbag will be 70 pounds and the plyo box will be 24 inches tall, while for the women's advanced and novice division, the weight of the sandbag will be 40 pounds, plyo box will be 20 inches tall. Your score will be the time to complete all movements. For each repetition unfinished, a second will be added to the 5-minute time cap. Each unfinished 25-meter lap of the overhead sandbag walk will merit an additional 6 seconds to your score. Before the timer starts, competitors may not touch the sandbag. Upon starting the front squats, the competitor must rack the weight on both of their shoulders. Elbows must also be underneath the bag at all times during the front squat. The competitor must squat convincingly below parallel. Judges will watch for the hip crease being well below the knee, and the movement ends when the competitor stands all the way up with full locked out knees, hips, and back. If the competitor does not go below parallel or does not fully lock out, that repetition will not count and will be considered a no rep. For the shoulder to shoulder, the competitor must clearly bring the sandbag over their heads and toward the other shoulder. Hands must clearly be above the head upon lifting, but it may graze the head with no issue. 1 repetition will be counted by the judge for every shoulder touch of the sandbag. The competitor cannot bring the sandbag toward the frontal plane, or the repetition will be not counted and be considered a no rep. Not lifting the sandbag and going down under it instead is also considered a no rep. For box step-ups, the competitor can carry the sandbag in any way they wish as long as it does not have any contact with the floor or the box at any given point of the repetition. Each repetition begins with both competitors' feet flat on the floor and sandbag off the floor. Each repetition ends when the competitor stands tall on top of the box with full locked out knees, hips, and back. If the competitor puts down the sandbag after a repetition is completed, they must start the next repetition from the floor and not from the box. Sandbags may not be carried from the box. They must always be carried from the floor. For deadlifts, the competitors must hold onto the straps of the sandbag, laying the sandbag on its side. Each repetition begins from the floor and ends with the competitor standing tall and fully locking out their knees, hips, and back. Competitors are allowed to drop the sandbag after completing each repetition. If the competitor chains together the repetition, judges will check if both ends of the sandbag clearly touches the floor before it is carried up. For power cleans, the competitor must bring the whole sandbag from the floor to the height of their shoulders while in full extension. Each repetition begins with the sandbag from the floor and ends with the sandbag clearly touching both shoulders, hands brought up at face level, and elbows under the sandbag. The competitor must stand in full extension with knees, hips, and back in full locked out position. If the competitor brings the sandbag down before fully locking out, or fails to start each repetition from the floor, that repetition will not count and be considered a no rep. Two methods will be allowed for the competitor to use in bringing the sandbag onto their shoulders. The clean and the bicep curl. For the overhead sandbag walk, competitors can immediately bring the sandbag overhead with arms extended. Competitors must complete two 25-meter laps going around the cone at each interval. While full lockout of the arms are not necessary, the sandbag must be over the head at all times and may not completely rest on top of the head. The competitor must clearly go around the cone at each interval. Throwing or tossing the sandbag before finishing all 50 meters will merit a return to the last correct position as deemed by their judge.